Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very short webinar, really on looking after your health and well-being during this isolation period we've got going on the back of COVID-19 and the government sanctions. Just to give you a little bit of a background as to my bio, I guess, as it is. I started off. I studied sport and exercise science at university. Got a Bachelor of Science honours degree. From there, went into occupational therapy, specifically working in mental health settings in psychiatric hospitals. Then I went into the local authority public health setting where I managed Blackmore Darwen's wellbeing service. And that was funded by Public Health England, very much looking at trying to support people to be healthier and well. Couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, set up my business PT Health Coaching, which has a branch called WorkSmart. And WorkSmart really is very much about supporting businesses to achieve their outcomes via the health and wellbeing method. So I'm very much an advocate of, if you look after your staff will look after your business. So without further ado, we'll move on to the first slide, and this is what we're going to cover today. Okay. So here's the overview. Now, I know we've had a few submissions in terms of questions already. One in particular from Sarah, which she asked about how the impact that social isolation has on her mentally, and if we have any solutions or any help with this. So I'm hoping that as we go through the presentation, that will start to unfold, and there'll be some ideas there for Sarah and the rest of you. But also, in particular, if you focus, Sarah, on slide 6. So slide 6 is very much about looking at how you can help yourself whilst at home. So here are the areas we're going to look at today. We're going to look at reframing the situation. So we're going to talk a little bit about guilt, the feeling of guilt and anxiety that comes with being socially isolated and not being around your colleagues and in work. We're going to talk a little bit more about acceptance and the importance of acceptance, and of course positivity, so having a positive mindset and the benefits that has. We're going to touch on some topics around meditation and mindfulness, the importance of routine, connecting with others, and physical activity in particular. So those 4 things are really key to helping us get through this situation that we're currently in. And then we're going to have some time at the end, as Ben said, for some questions and answers. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, we've got reframing the situation. And we talked about guilt, anxiety, acceptance, and positivity. Many people have reported feeling guilt, stress and anxiety since the recent government sanctions have been imposed. Guilt of going out, guilt when shopping, guilt when you get glares from other shoppers, guilt of feeling like you're not meeting your child's educational needs whilst at home. There are a variety of things surrounding guilt. You sometimes, even if you're doing the right thing, sometimes you feel guilty because you're just a little bit unsure about, am I doing the right thing? Is this right? What do other people think? And those sorts of thoughts start to creep in. So guilt is quite a common feeling in all this. It can be difficult to detach from guilt. But if you think of guilt as just a belief, whether it's accurate or not, that you compromise your own standards of conduct, or you've violated some universal moral standard, then surely only you and you alone can truly know if you've done that or not. So sort of going on what other people might think isn't sort of an accurate way of measuring guilt. And you'll have your own moral values and your own moral standpoints. And I think it's very important to stick by those at times like this, and realizing that if you feel you're doing the right thing, 99% of the time, you probably are. Remind yourself you've done nothing wrong. I think that's really, really important. And also, no one can tell you otherwise if you're doing the right thing or not. Guilt leads on to anxiety. So it's a feeling of worry, nervousness, unease about something which has an uncertain outcome. There are lots of unanswered questions about COVID-19, and also the uncertainty surrounding how long it's going to go on for. We don't know how long we're going to be in this situation. Again, if we reframe that situation to focus on what we do know and actually what we can control, then that can help reduce our anxiety quite significantly. There are other ways in which we can help to reduce anxiety too. So things like following a routine, which we're going to touch on, mindfulness and meditation, physical activity. So they're all things we're going to look at in a bit more detail. And obviously leading a healthy lifestyle, so the importance of healthy nutrition, hydrating yourself regularly, and the importance of sleep as well. We'll look at some of those healthy lifestyle topics in more detail. Acceptance of our situation. So acceptance is really, really important. It can't be changed. This isn't a situation that we can get away from. It is what it is. And if you look at the positives, they're the key to getting through the situation that we're in. So try to reframe that and think, the situation I'm in, I'm accepting it. There's nothing I can do about it. However, what are some of the opportunities that come with being in this situation that you don't usually get? So believe it or not, there's usually someone worse off than you. And also, we've been given what's called the gift of time. So we've been given some time now to work on things that perhaps we wouldn't normally get a chance to do. Or we've been put in a situation that gives us a better opportunity to do something else. So for example, in my position, I'm generally out and about working with people on a one-to-one basis or speaking to big groups of people. Now, what this situation has done for me is it's helped me spend more time with my children, which can be hard work. I'm not going to lie, it's really, really difficult at times, and trying to balance the sort of juggling act of educating your children, keeping them occupied whilst running a full-time business, and my wife being at home as well, working on her business. It can be tricky. But one of the things and the positive things I take from that by reframing the situation is I'm getting to spend some time with my family, which normally on a day-to-day basis, I'll be lucky if I get 2 or 3 hours with them. We're eating meals together, going for walks together, all the things that you sort of take for granted that you maybe only do once every couple of weeks a year on holiday, you get to do more frequently. So that's how I reframe my situation. And that makes it more positive. There is someone always worse off than you. We're all in this together. Waking up, reflecting on or writing down what you have to be grateful or positive for each day can really help you reframe this situation we're in into a positive. So a lot of people talk, and it's quite a popular thing, about meditation and mindfulness. Now, how often in life do you find yourself fully concentrated on the task at hand compared to thinking of what you're going to be doing next? And I know I don't. Usually when I'm in the middle of a task, I'll be thinking about, and I just need to do this, and I just need to do that. Oh, and what about that? And I mustn't forget about that. And why didn't I do that before? Constantly thinking about other things. The difficulty with that is we become less productive, and it can be really stressful. Being more mindful and switching on your awareness to things that are going on for you and being able to focus your mind on the task at hand takes quite a bit of practice. But mindfulness meditation is a proven way to help reduce anxiety symptoms. It's a proven way to calm you down, and it's also a proven way to clear your mind. So when you find yourself with your head feeling full, like you feel that you've got 101 tasks to do, it's taking 5 or 10 minutes break every now and again to do some mindfulness or meditation practice that will help you refocus, re-energize, calm you right down, and actually make you much more productive person compared to being in that state of stress or anxiety. There's a couple of apps that are really, really good to use for mindfulness and meditation, which I can recommend from using them myself. One of them is Headspace. So there's Headspace and there's another one called Calm. Both are free apps to download. They also have quite a bit of free content on there as well. They do have some paid subscriptions if you wanted more content. However, some of the free stuff is actually really good and really useful. And it doesn't take much time. Literally takes 5 or 10 minutes every single day. One of the things I would say is try and get into a routine with this. So don't just use it once or twice and then feel better and then say, oh, I feel better now, I'm going to stop doing it. The key to this is, and like anyone who's had any sort of injury, who's had physio treatment, the physio helps and makes the injury better. But unfortunately, when you stop doing the physio exercises, what tends to happen is that injury tends to just to creep back in. So really important that when you get into a routine with it, to try and keep that routine, because keeping the routine will help inoculate or prevent future stressful episodes, but also keep you very grounded and quite calm. Okay. And I think the other thing to talk about is the importance of a routine. When we're working and we're just in a day-to-day routine, we've got to travel to meetings, we've got different things to do, we've got the children to pick up, we've got a gym class to get to. There's always things that are sort of taking us and helping us keep a routine, if that makes sense. And when you're working from home, it's very easy to lose all form of routine or even a form of purpose. And that can be really detrimental. Quite often we might find ourselves having to adjust our lives to make room for recovery. It can sound counterintuitive, but developing a daily routine can help us feel more in control of everything. And it just helps make room for the things that are important in our lives. Routine can aid our mental health. It can help us cope with change, to form healthy habits, and it also helps us reduce stress levels. Routine can be an anchor as well. So that thing that just grounds us and reduces those stress levels. Trying to remember things can be really stressful and can fill our brains up with everything on our to-do list, which can be incredibly overwhelming. When we have a routine, a lot of things we do day to day just tend to find a slot and just fit in. We don't have to think about them anymore. So for example, when we're well, we don't have to remember to clean our teeth because we just know that that's a habit after we've had a breakfast. Routine can take the guesswork and the uncertainty out of bits of our day. And it can allow us to feel more controlled and less stressed. So one of the things I do suggest to people whilst working from home is do all the things you would normally do on a normal work day. So if you usually get up at 6:30, get up at 6:30. The things I've put in there around home exercise and some meditation and other bits and bobs, they're things I would encourage you to do as part of a daily routine. But try and stick to a normal routine. So still get dressed in your work clothes. Set up your workspace as if it is your workspace. Have all the normal routines that you would normally have. Breakfast at the same time, start work at the same time. Give yourself little breaks throughout the day, whether it's a coffee break or a social media break or a bit of a time to make a video call to a family member or a relative or a colleague. And then of course, try and fit in some regular activity as well, physical activity. If we're stuck inside for too long, it can have a detrimental impact on our mental health. So it's really important to get outdoors. And if you can get outdoors in green space as well, we know that's even more beneficial than just exercise on its own. I touched on then about connecting with others. We're actually social creatures, whether we're introverts or extroverts, we're actually social creatures. From a practical perspective, we required group support to survive when we were Stone Age humans. Being part of a tribe helped us to forage and hunt for food, to protect us against wild animals and other threats that might be out there. There were actually very severe consequences in the past to being isolated or being alone. Now, interestingly, that instinctual need to still have humans in our lives still remains. And when we're out of touch for significant periods of time from humans, it can have quite a drastic impact on our mental and physical health. And it does tend to deteriorate over time. If you look at some of the statistics around long-term conditions and early mortality, it tends to be that people who are isolated, who live alone, have higher rates of mortality and higher rates of long-term health conditions as well. Now, isolation doesn't necessarily mean living alone. Isolation could be that you live in a busy household, but actually you don't really have anyone to offload or speak to. So I know people who live in big families, but actually they don't really feel comfortable speaking to anyone about their problems in that family. So they have to go elsewhere for that. One of the other common things you see particularly in older couples, is when one of the partners passes away, what tends to happen is the other partner passes away in quite quick succession. And the sad part about that is because that person then becomes socially isolated. They've lived many years with an individual or another human being, and all of a sudden that's taken away from them. And that can be quite a shock. Obviously, it's more difficult for extroverts in this situation because extroverts draw positive energy from human beings. Introverts actually might find this quite a nice period of time initially, but interestingly, even introverted people will start to miss social contact with others. So there are a couple of things that you can do just to connect with others. Number one is to keep your pre-existing routines. We talked about routine on the last slide. Just to adapt things slightly to meet your current situation, I would suggest. So that might mean creating quite a solid social calendar. And part of that is things like having video calls with a friend and actually making yourself a nice coffee as you do that. So it's almost mimicking what it would be like to go to a coffee shop and meet a friend. You can do other things like have a gin night or have a few beers with your friends on a Friday night over a Zoom or a WhatsApp call. There's colleague meetings as always. There's live exercise sessions online that you could become a part of. You can actually become quite entrepreneurial with this. So if those things that I've suggested sort of switch on to you, but actually no one's done it yet, be the person to do it. So one of the things I saw online recently was a person who had invented something called quarantinis. So her and her friends met up on a Friday night on a Zoom call and made themselves martinis, but they called them quarantinis because they were stuck inside, of course. So I thought that was a really good way for those 5 girls to meet up, still have a laugh, still have a drink, connect with other people, connect with their friends that they found really beneficial, but almost like making light out of it as well, because the humor in this situation will help you get through it as well. You can also have things like virtual breakfast, virtual takeaways, all sorts of stuff. So me and my 6 friends met up last Friday on a Zoom call. We all had a beer and something to eat, and we just had a chat. We even did a bit of a football quiz as well and really enjoyed ourselves, had a really good time. And that's something we would normally do on maybe a monthly basis. So why not do the same thing? I think it's the other way you can connect with others is to help others in your locality. So you might offer a small gesture like do a shop for them, or it might be a gesture of goodwill. You can even have a chat with them on your doorstep. You know, there's nothing wrong with knocking on the window and having a chat through the window. Notes on the window or little pictures can really help you connect with others. So for example, the middle picture that you can see there, help send gin. My wife put this message up on our light box, and obviously that would be turned around and it would be directed at the street. And we've already had a few comments from people on social media saying that really made us chuckle when we walked past your house the other day. And it's just bringing a little bit of humour to things. And then obviously when we're out walking with the kids, we found little pebbles like the one on the right of the slide, with little messages on, which is really nice. And then, you know, I've been encouraging my kids to do the same and connect with other people. So yeah, the power of humans should not be underestimated, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. The other thing as well how you can connect with others is to spend as much time as you can outside while you're exercising. So if you're exercising indoors, of course, that's just you on your own or the people you're surrounded with. But if you can get outside and exercise, you generally pass the odd person on your walk or on your run or on your bike ride. So if you can get outside for your exercise, that's going to do you the world of good in terms of connecting with other people, because you can stay a safe distance away from somebody and still have a nice conversation with them. And then have a think about your neighbours as well. So if you're lucky enough to have a back garden which has a wall or a garden, you're a safe distance away from your neighbours, but you could still have a bit of a conversation with them, or even have a drink with them if you wanted to. So there are ways you can connect with others while still being stuck indoors for most of the time. Now, we touched on physical activity, and we talk about physical activity a lot, and there's a variety of reasons for this. It's a proven way to improve mood. It reduces stress and it reduces anxiety symptoms, all of which have been exacerbated through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's why GPs are now beginning to prescribe physical activity as a treatment for such. I spoke to a GP last year in a GP surgery and just asked, it was a bit of one of the questions I just like to ask people are just hypotheticals. And one of the things I said to the GP was, if you could give one pill to every single patient that walked into your consultation room, what would that pill have in it? What would it consist of? And he said, physical activity. If I could give someone a pill to have 30 minutes to an hour of physical activity every single day, that would reduce pretty much all symptoms of any mental health and physical health complaint. It was amazing that he just said, I just want people to be active. He said that has the biggest impact on our overall health and well-being. More so than diet, more so than reducing alcohol, more so than stopping smoking. That's how significant physical activity is. And that really hit home then for me. And the three bullet points we've got there around why that is. So we've got something called an endorphin hypothesis. Endorphins are morphine-like chemicals. So if anyone's had a quite severe operation and been on morphine, you'll know what it's like. It reduces pain quite significantly, and it gives you a slight sense of euphoria, which some people call the runner's high. So endorphins are very much like morphines. They are a chemical that the brain releases on commencement of physical activity. Physical activity also makes you feel warmer. So the thermogenic hypothesis is that as you become warmer, you become more comforted. And when we're cold as human beings, we tend to be in a position of stress. So our bodies start to shiver, and that's our body's way of trying to keep our core temperature in a safe place. Now, if we are too cold, it can be quite severe for our health. So our body really works hard in a period of stress to increase that core temperature. So the reason that physical activity makes us feel better is because it warms us up. Now, it's one of the reasons why the Romans, when they invaded Britain, built Roman baths. It's because it's warm, and they came from a warm country to a relatively cool country in Britain. So they wanted to do something that would help them feel better. It's one of the reasons why the Swedes invented saunas, because they live in a cold climate and the heat is therapeutic. It's one of the reasons why we spend a fortune every single year on going away to hot holidays or abroad, or going for spa treatments or visiting saunas or steam rooms. It generally gives us a sense of comfort and well-being. And interestingly, we think that might be linked to, again, Stone Age times, when being around a fire would be our sense of safety and comfort and warmth. There's also something called the self-esteem hypothesis. And in a really basic way, self-esteem, if you complete some sort of physical activity, the completion of a task, and a positive task at that, will improve your self-esteem. It's a sense of accomplishment in a way. And that's why self-esteem makes you feel better. And that's why physical activity improves self-esteem, which then makes you feel better. Okay. There was, just before we move on to the Q's and A's, as I said at the start, I know Sarah had mentioned about, so she mentioned she was an extrovert, and how that has quite a detrimental, being isolated had quite a detrimental impact on her mental well-being, I guess. So I'm hoping that some of those slides sort of covered that. Interestingly, she was doing quite a lot of proactive things, but she just asked if there was anything else. And I'm hoping that some of those other suggestions, maybe the online stuff, or speaking to the neighbours, doing small deeds, getting on social media in a positive way, and actually doing your exercise outside where you meet other people within a safe distance, hopefully sort of covered that. Ben, is there anything you want to come in and add at this stage?
Right. Well, Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Paul. That was really enlightening, and certainly from my perspective, I've taken quite a lot from that actually, because I confess that the last couple, I've actually been working from home now for the last 3 weeks, having to self-isolate for the first, and then our office closure. So getting out, and I've got an 11-month-old myself, so as you can imagine, she's driving me at the wall. But so yeah, so those some of those things tips are really good, and really I'm definitely going to take those on board actually. We do have some questions that are coming in, and for all of you who are listening, certainly if you've got any questions that you want to ask Paul, please get them in using the Q&A box. So Paul, I'm gonna kick off with this first one, and quite simply, so the question really is, how do we keep positive in a situation which, you know, it ultimately is a very negative one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it almost seems counterintuitive, doesn't it, that we are in it's not a positive situation really, it's a negative situation, I think, for most of us, and we interpret it as such. But actually, because of that, it's even more important to remain positive, to get through it as well as we possibly can. There's a few tips that I like to use for positivity in particular. Number one is writing down something that you are thankful for each day, that you're positive for. If you can wake up in the morning and start the day in a positive frame of mind by writing down something you're grateful for. So for example, you might say something like, I'm grateful to have my health, which I know that a lot of people don't have at the moment. That's what I class as what's called the silver lining in the cloud that we currently have. And I would challenge people to do that every single morning, but try and find something different to be grateful for every morning. And that can be quite difficult. You might find yourself looking for really, really tiny things like, oh, actually, I haven't woke up with a headache this morning, or oh, actually, it's sunny outside. Little things like that you've got to be thankful for. The other thing as well is having a plan. So we talked about a routine before, and if you can plan what you're going to do the next day in the evening, just spend 15-20 minutes in the evening to write down what you are going to achieve the next day, the tasks you've got to do, and intersperse that with some nice stuff as well. I think that's really important. Having a purpose in the morning and having that plan is really important for keeping your positivity up. You may have watched any of you watched some like survival programs about people who've been stranded on a desert island or survived weeks and weeks and weeks with minimal food and water, but actually come out of it relatively well. One of the things that the people report who survive are the people have kept in a good routine. So they've got up in the morning, they've had a wash, they've cleaned their area, they've foraged for food. And what's really interesting is it's a really basic concept that we sometimes lose in the big scheme of life. We're just so programmed to get on and do a normal routine. And this change that we're currently in at the moment is a bit of a shock to us because it's outside of our normal comfort zone. The other thing to remain positive is meditation, as we talked about before. It helps clear your mind, it helps reset your focus, and it can help just to take some of those negative worries and negative thoughts that come in. And then finally, one of the things that I think is really important is try that acceptance stuff we talked about before, is trying to accept what you can't change. So as a really basic thing, if you have a series of worries or problems, you can actually write those down and have a column for things that you have no control over, that you can't change, and things that you have quite a significant amount of control over and you've got the ability to change them. And what I would say is make the stuff that you have no control over, that you need to accept, as your acceptance list. So you look at that and go, oh well. And then on this side, the stuff that you can do something about, so you've got some control over, make that your to-do list. So the things that you have some control over that have been worrying you, make it into a to-do list. Break those things down into manageable bite-sized chunks, and that will help you become quite productive. And I think almost see it as a challenge. So look at it in terms of, we could be in this situation for well, we don't know, but perhaps 12 weeks or more maybe. How nice would it be to come out of those 12 weeks and have a long list of things and jobs that you've been wanting to do for such a long time ticked off because we've had that time to do it. So I think it's that thing of your mindset being accept some stuff, because we know that acceptance has a huge impact on mental well-being. We know that the happiest nation in Europe is the Scandinavian nations. And one of the reasons for that is they have quite an accepting culture and an acceptance mindset. That's not to say they're not competitive and they don't want to succeed, but they have this culture and this mindset of acceptance of others and acceptance of a situation and trying to make the best out of that situation with the things they can control on this side. And I think if we can take some of that on board, I think that's really useful for increasing positivity.
Excellent. And actually, someone has just made the comment as well. In a way, they've kind of taken it as that sort of wake-up call, really. And they've mentioned that they're exercising now, which 2 weeks ago they weren't really doing. So I suppose it's how you take that spin on it and how you turn it to a benefit for yourself, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, so there's a question that's come in here. So what do you feel will be the most positive side effects from workers being isolated during this pandemic?
Interesting. What to say? Like, having worked in a busy office previously, in my old role, I found that quite distracting sometimes. So being tapped on the shoulder every now and again, say, "Oh, Paul, can I just?" And we know that on average, every single distraction you have, it takes approximately 15 minutes to get fully engaged back to the level you were at previously. So that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But and if you were to say, well, I have 10 distractions a day, that's quite a significant period of time wasted, isn't it? Even if that distraction only takes you 5 minutes to do. So interestingly, working from home for some people might be more productive because they've less distractions. And what's really interesting is if you're passing somebody, you're more likely to stop and ask them something compared to if you have to pick up the phone and say, "Oh, I'm going to make this person this phone call." Usually you only make a phone call if it's important. But when you're passing someone, it's very easy to go, "Oh, can I just pick your brain on?" So what could be positive out of this for workers is it might actually help remove some distractions and increase productivity in some people. Obviously, that's just in some people. Other people might benefit more from the interaction of being in an office. I think the other thing to think about is you might start to receive more emails on the back of working from home. One of the things to consider is emails are usually someone else's work for you. So when someone sent you an email, they generally wipe their hands of it and say, "Well, I've done my bit, I've sent that email." There are a number of ways in which you can control your inbox. So one of the things I do is I tend only to email people twice a day, and it's at 10 a.m. in the morning and 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And one of the reasons I do that is emails shouldn't be used as an emergency or in a way that needs to be done quickly. So if something is urgent or something is emergency, I would expect someone to give me a call. And you can actually start to coach your colleagues into that routine. If they realize that they're only going to get a response from you mid-morning and mid-afternoon, they're probably more likely to give you a call, and it could be sorted so much more quickly. There's the less issues of, what did they mean by that when they wrote that in the email? Or I can't quite tell what the tone is there. They seem a bit angry. There's so much complexity with writing emails, which a quick call could sort of remove all of that. So just be careful that your normal interactions with people don't become email tennis, which of course in the end just becomes so convoluted and so complicated. I would always encourage people to have a real conversation with somebody. But of course, if you can have a real conversation with somebody, make it worthwhile, make it an important conversation and not just "Oh, by the way, can I just pick your brain on?" if that makes sense.
Yes, that brilliant. It certainly beats my just simply delete option. No, that's fantastic. Just before I go on to the next question, someone had asked the question whether this is being recorded. Just to confirm that for you, yes, this is being recorded, so it will be shared following the webinar, and you'll be emailed about that directly over the next few days once it's up and running. Okay, so the next question that we've got here, Paul, is what suggestions do you have in coping with work and having the kids around too?
Yeah, great question. First-hand experience of that. Very, very tricky situation. So I think the first thing is not to feel pressured. So it's very easy to go online, and it's very easy to see all the other parents that you're friends with doing loads of really interesting educational stuff with the kids. And that can really make you feel, as we talked about, guilty. It can make you feel like, oh, like, how can I keep up with them? I should be doing more. And of course, that really ramps up your stress levels. So I think the first thing is not to judge what you see on social media as day-to-day life, because in the big scheme of things, that is a really small positive snapshot of what that person's doing that day. And the rest of it will probably be tearing your hair out, running around after the kids, picking things up, etc., etc. So I think the first thing which is important is to speak to your line manager first of all, and just have a really honest discussion around the situation that you're in at home. I think if your line manager doesn't have realistic expectations of what you can do in a day, I think that can then lead to issues further on down the line. And I think if you have a really honest discussion and just say, look, I'm working from home, realistically, I'm going to struggle to fully commit to certain things on the back of, I've got 2 young children at home, or I've got a young child at home. There's 2 of us here. However, we're going to have to juggle the commitments of that. So I think having an open and honest discussion with your line manager initially is really, really important. So they know, they can fully understand what you can commit to as an individual. And probably the times of day that are going to be difficult for you, around lunchtime, around mid-morning, around mid-afternoon, when you'll probably be preparing lunches, making snacks for the children, getting them engaged in something. I think the other thing to consider is, like if you've ever had a dog, or like what we do for ourselves, if you exercise an individual like children, they tend to be a lot calmer and a lot more manageable. So one of the things I suggest you do is do some form of exercise with them in the morning, which really just burns off that excess pent-up energy, which they will undoubtedly have by being stuck indoors for the majority of the time. So one of the things I've been doing recently is just the PE with Joe, which is the Joe Wicks body coach stuff. He's on live at 9 a.m. every single morning. It's 30 minutes in total, warm up, 20 minutes work, cool down, and he makes it fun for kids. All the activities are around either a superhero or an animal or something that's sort of child friendly, child related. He does shouts out to kids. He also does some things in the background around, can you spot the difference? So every day he changes his background around for the kids to try and notice if you can spot the difference. And then on Fridays, so as of tomorrow, he's doing like a fancy dress Friday. So the kids can dress up in fancy dress and work out in a Spider-Man costume or a princess or whatever it might be. So I would say one of the things you could do is try to get some energy off your kids to start with by doing some form of exercise. Now that's just one example. You might choose to take them out on their bikes or go for a brisk walk or something like that. The other thing I would say is the routine we talked about earlier, do exactly the same for your children. So make sure that your children still differentiate between Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So Saturdays and Sundays being the downtime, being the weekend, being the time where there's not really any commitments, and the Monday to Friday, then realizing that it's still a school day. So those days, you might decide to have a big poster, an A3 chart, a piece of paper that gives them the routine every single day. So a little bit like I showed on one of the previous slides, this one here. So the importance of routine, your children can have set times. You can even set alarms. You know, you can get the children to take empowerment of that as well. Right, what's next on your agenda today? Oh, we get to do this. And again, if you plan ahead, if you, the evening before, just spend 15, 20 minutes when the kids have gone to bed, just to plan out the day for the next day, it makes it so much easier. But also, don't be afraid to do some significant downtime for them. Make sure they have maybe time on the tablet, time in front of the TV, time listening to music, time playing on a computer, because actually it is unrealistic for you doing a role or a job and at the same time trying to do a full-time role of a teacher. It's just impossible. There's no way you can do it. You know, if a teacher and the teaching assistant and maybe another teacher and assistant is looking after a group of children full-time, how can you possibly do that whilst you've also got another role as well? So I would make sure that your children still have plenty of downtime as well. And try to get them involved in some chores around the house as well. So when we're doing chore time here, for example, at 1 o'clock, get them involved. It might be tidying the room, it might be making the bed, it might be helping with the cooking, it might be washing up. Any little thing that makes them feel like they're involved will keep them active and keep them stimulated. Yeah, so there's a few things there that hopefully help with that. But I think the main thing is just don't feel pressure of it. There are going to be good days and bad days, but we're all in it together. We've all got this same problem, and trust me, most parents would go, this has been a nightmare. This is really hard work. There's no parents out there going, oh, this is fantastic. There are lovely elements to this, spending more time with your kids. And I like to frame it as that, but don't be fooled into thinking that everyone's finding it perfect and easy. It's not. I think 99% of parents would go, yeah, this is tough.
I imagine if there were any kids listening to this, they probably would have really appreciated that answer up until about the part where you started talking about chores and tidying the bedrooms. But okay, so on the flip side, then there's a question here with relation to the sort of more elderly and vulnerable. So a lot of people who are elderly or more vulnerable probably don't have access to social media, and it's not something at this moment in time really that's possible to sort of install and show them at this time. Do you have any tips for sort of interaction with those people that don't have that?
Yeah, I think it's almost going back to old-fashioned methods, I guess. Phone calls are really important, and a regular phone call to an elderly person could have a massive boost. You know, that could be the one thing they look forward to in the day. And it doesn't have to be long, it just has to be, 5-10 minutes. It might be an elderly relative that you think, well, I'll just spend half an hour a day with them. And a lot of the time, they just want to hear about your day, because if they've not had the ability to go out, or they're stranded at home and they may be infirm or maybe not have the ability to get out of the house, sometimes they might just want to hear about what you've done today, just something interesting, something funny, something, your day-to-day routine. Just listening is really nice for some people, particularly if it's from a loved one or a friend or a family member. So I think going back to some of the old-fashioned ways of interacting with people. So before social media, what would we have done? We'd have probably called someone on the phone. We'd have probably popped round and spot someone at the door, or, well, obviously we'd have gone inside, but at this stage we might just pop round and stand at the door and have a conversation with someone, have a conversation through the window. Just little bits like that, I guess. Don't be afraid either to send things through the post as well. So, again, seems like a really old-fashioned way to do it, and it might seem a bit bizarre for people who are just used to sending emails or text messages or have a video call, but a letter can be quite nice. I remember I used to send letters to my grandma because she lived away, and we used to call on a regular basis, but I used to send her letters and she sent me letters as well, and that was our way of staying in touch, and she loved it. She said she loved receiving a letter through the post from me because it was interesting, and it was things I've been doing and what I've been up to. So massively don't underestimate the power of interacting with anybody, but particularly an elderly person who's isolated. They have so much interest in what's going on in the outside world because they're stuck inside. It doesn't even have to be a full letter. If you're driving past somewhere, ringing the doorbell and leaving a little parcel with something in it, or you might cook a big batch of food. So if you've cooked a big pot of chili or a big pot of curry or a stew or a casserole, don't be afraid to pop some of that up ring the doorbell, leave a little message, and have it there waiting for them to pick up for something to eat, because it's those little gestures that get people through. And I also think try to keep something as part of a routine as well for that individual. It's something to look forward for them each day. So one of the things we've been doing is ringing our parents every single day, just 15 minutes, just a quick update, let them speak to the kids as well. And as my mum said this morning, it's the highlight of her day, which is lovely. It's really, really nice. And I think that's really important. So just almost like thinking back, what would we have done before we had social media, mobile phones, etc. And of course, there are the restrictions of how close you can get to somebody, but you can still go and visit and say hello.
Excellent. Yeah, and actually someone has made a comment and said that they've, for their older aunts who don't use IT, they've been sending them cards and chocolates and stuff.
Oh,
So it's a prime example of the key things that you can be doing.
yeah.
So coming back to sort of the working environment then, we've got a question here. How do you think reintegration back into a large working environment will actually affect those who have thrived in isolation? What can we do for those people?
Yeah, good question. That's it's very forward thinking, actually, because I think we're in the here and now, aren't we? And we're thinking, oh, how do we get through this, and what we're going to do, and how do we adapt? But interestingly, there's the consideration of how do we come out the other side as well. So what's it going to be like when we go back to this situation? And I think we'd be fools to suggest that actually when we go back, everything will be like, oh, brilliant, back to normal, I feel great. It's not. It's another transition period. So as humans, we tend to be a little bit, if you think of us like sheep, we tend to follow the path of least resistance and just sort of follow the crowd. There's a really good example of this. There's a documentary a couple of years ago called, I think it was Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, and it was trying to beat the sugar issue in the UK. And on the back of it, a sugar tax came in on the back of his work. And one of the things he did around human behaviour was he noticed at one tube station in London that 75% of people use the escalators and 25% of people use the stairs to get up onto the streets in London. So what they decided to do was do a bit of a test around a human's thought process on just following the path of least resistance and almost being averse to change. And one of the things he did was he put footprints on the floor that led all the way up the steps and out onto the street. And again, they did a tally throughout the day, and they found that what was really interesting was 50% of people use the stairs and 50% use the escalators. So a 25% increase in stair use. And when they did a few just quick measurements at the top, just asking people, oh, excuse me, can I just ask why you use the stairs then? What was really interesting was the majority of responses were, oh, I just saw the footprints on the floor and just followed them. I didn't think, I just did it. And that's what we are like as humans. We just do stuff. And when we get into a routine of things, it almost becomes subconscious. We're setting pathways in the brain, neural pathways that become ingrained, and it becomes part of the norm. And the difficulty is when there is a significant change, it becomes stressful, because all of a sudden, those norms that we've been used to over a period of time, which tend to take about 3 weeks to kick in. So most routine and habits form within 21 days. Once those kick in, it's very difficult to go back to a previous behavior. So if we're saying, let's say I've said 12 weeks before, let's say it's going to be 12 weeks. That's quite a significant period of time to be in one routine and then try and get back into another. So I think the question's a really good one. And I think we need to do just as much work on reintegrating people back into work. And that might be things like making reasonable adjustments, such as let's not go back to work fully into the office. Let's do a graded approach where we ask people to come in twice a week or 3 times a week and build that up over a series of weeks until people are integrated back into the workplace fully. The other thing to think about is if you find your member of staff has been more productive and it's worked better than working from home, one of the things you need to consider as an organization is that something we need to implement permanently? Because ultimately, you want your staff to perform at the very best. Now, if performing at their very best means they work from home and they spend little time in the office, and that's just been something that you've noticed on the back of the situation we're in, then why not try to encourage that? Or the other thing you can do is have a conversation about, why is it that you're more productive at home? You can have a really good conversation about that. I've noticed your KPIs are significantly higher since we did this. Why do you think that is? And if an individual says, well, actually, it was less distractions and it was this and I had a better routine and blah, 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 then why would you not encourage your member of staff to continue with that? Because ultimately, as I said at the very beginning, happy and healthy staff tend to be more productive, more creative. They have a better mindset towards work. They're more resilient. They're so much more efficient in what they do. So interestingly, don't assume that you should always go back to the old ways. There's lots of learning to take from this. And I think if we can take that learning and apply it going forwards when we go back, I think that's really important. So I think there needs to be, going back to your original question, I think there needs to be a slow process. I think it has to be a gradual thing and not just right, everyone back to work, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the office. I think it has to be more of a graded approach. I also think there should be more support for staff as well. So making sure that the support, that things we put on today and some of the links and things that I'll send out to people, they should still be there, because like I said before, change is very stressful. So people should have regular one-to-ones with their managers. I think it's really important that supervision is done on a regular basis, just for the initial few weeks, few months. That might take a bit of time and a bit of work, but ultimately you want your staff to be healthy and well and happy. And if they're not, and they're struggling to adjust to the new situation, then they're not going to perform, and that's going to have a bigger impact on the company further down the line. So I think it's really important to have regular contact and regular drop-ins with your staff to make sure that they're okay. And that might be in the form of supervision or more regular meetings. It might be putting on some holistic therapies or workplace wellbeing initiatives for their members of staff as well, just to make sure that the transition isn't too much of a stressful one. There might be things that you can find online, or there might be newsletters and other bits and bobs that your company could create in preparation for the transition back, which touches on some of these things. So the newsletter or the email that's sent out might say something about, on the back of the recent government legislation or government sanctions, we are now allowed to return to the office and work again from the office. As your company, and we want to make sure that you're looking after, you're looked after and you're healthy and well, we're going to put these following things in place. And you might just offer a few key things in your organization that will help keep your staff healthy and well. It might be an employee assistance program. It might be access to a counsellor in occupational health. It might be more regular one-to-ones with your line manager. It might be putting in place longer break times or shorter break times, or it might be allowing people, as I said before, to work from home for some days just to transition back. So there are a few things that companies could put in place, but ultimately a member of staff, as long as they feel supported, I think that's the key thing. You know, we talk about motivators in work, and money is an initial reason for going into a job, but ultimately the key things that staff say about wanting to stay at a company and perform for that company are feeling supported and feeling empowered to do the job to the best of their ability. And they're the things that keep staff healthy and well. So yeah, I think that's all I can suggest on that at the moment.
No, I think some great tips there, and actually had a couple of comments around that, and someone was agreeing and sort of saying, you know, if someone was on long-term sick, for example, they would normally come back on a phased return. So it's kind of almost sort of a similar kind of scenario. There was a further comment from someone here that put, you know, the whole integrated returns is a brilliant idea, and certainly will help with a return from calamity. But I suppose one of the things that this person's mentioning is just to be careful that people don't feel sort of left out or feel like isolated further or deselected in any way. But as you say, it comes down to making sure that your staff, you know, feel supported, and that's the key thing there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to continue with some more of these questions. Just a quick one. Someone's just asked a question. Are there any books that you would recommend on this topic at all? Just for a little inspiration during this time.
Yes, there are a couple, and it depends on how you like to look after yourself, I guess. There's a guy called Paul McGee, and you may have known him called the Sumo guy. So Sumo is an acronym, SUMO, and it stands for Shut Up and Move On, which sounds quite harsh, doesn't it? But he's very much about we come up with our own problems. And if you were to say to someone else, I've got this problem, usually the other person would go, well, you just need to do this. They would have a solution for it. And what he's trying to say is people create problems in the head that perhaps aren't actually there. And it's very much about a mindset. And it's like a great self-help book, if you will. And you can get it on audiobook and physical hard copy as well. But he's a psychologist by trade, but he simplifies that. And it's almost a little bit like CBT, but it's a more simplified version. So I think that's really useful because it gets you to think of things very practically. So rather than worrying about things that you can't control and all the other bits and bobs, he'll be saying, what is the problem? How do we sort it? And there's some really good practical stuff in there. It's very much a self-help book. Is Sumo guy. So that's one that's worth having a look at. The other one I quite like is the chimp paradox. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. So the very obvious front cover is just a picture of a cartoon chimpanzee. And the guy, again, is a psychologist, but he's worked in sports psychology in particular. And it's again a very simplified and easy version of psychology that makes it understandable to the average person. And basically what he talks about is that your brain has two sides. It has a human brain and a chimp or a chimpanzee brain. And the human brain is your calm, methodical, rational brain, the one that knows right from wrong, the one that makes really informed decisions, the one that is there for good advice. This is the brain that if someone's to ask you for advice, this is the brain that would switch on. And the other part of your brain, your chimpanzee or your chimp, as it were, is your irrational, the fearful, anxious, stressy, angry, upset part of your brain that sometimes comes out before your rational brain has a chance to kick in. And the reason your chimp kicks in very quickly is sometimes about the emotion. So you've had a stimulus that's stressful and all of a sudden your chimpanzee is screaming. And basically what he says is you've got to soothe your chimp. You can't fight it. You can't fight these emotions. It's really important to have these emotions, but it's really important that your human brain can soothe your chimp. So he says never fight it, because if a chimpanzee tried to fight a human, the chimpanzee would win because it's a stronger animal. However, if you can soothe your chimp, by putting things in place, which it suggests in the book, that help keep you calm, help keep you relaxed and focused, that's where you win. So what he's trying to say is your chimpanzee is vital. In fight or flight, life or death situations, this is the thing, the chimpanzee will help you survive. However, for the majority, 99% of our lives, it's the human brain that gets us through our day-to-day stuff. So it's about soothing your chimp and allowing your human brain to flourish. And that's very much about some of the stuff we talked about today, about acceptance, about reducing anxiety and stress and improving your mood. And he suggests a lot of different things you can do to help soothe your chimp and help your human flourish. So the two books are The Sumo Guy, and I think he's got a few versions of that book now. I think he's written extra editions. And then the other book is The Chimp Paradox.
Excellent. Okay, we have come to the end of our hour slot. There are still a few more questions still to answer. So what we'll do, don't worry if your question hasn't been answered. We'll look at these following the webinar, and Paul has kindly agreed to put some written responses to those, which we can post online along with a copy of the recording of this webinar. So you will get your answers shortly, but just not unfortunately verbally right this moment. Just want to say Paul, thank you. That was a fantastic session. I certainly learnt a lot from it, and I from the comments that are coming in from people, I think a lot of people also found it really, really informative. Before we sign off, I'm just going to hand over to Stuart Bailey, who is a committee member for the Manchester and North West district branches. He's just going to do a final sign off, and then the meeting will end. So Stuart, over to you.
Yeah, well, the one thing I took away from that, Paul, is when life deals you lemons, make quarantinis. That seems the most sensible thing to do. Firstly, our chair, Chris, is unable to join us today, and he's asked me to say a few words on his behalf. Thank you for joining us, first of all. And a huge thank you to Paul Thompson for presenting the first of our webinars. We have lots more of these to come. The committee are working hard in the background to provide you with more of this content, and especially for your CPD going forward. If you'd like to see more of what we're doing, go to the IOSH website and the Manchester branch and districts microsite. You'll certainly find what we're doing there. We will be sending out a short survey following this on SurveyMonkey. I ask you to make sure you just spend a few minutes to fill that in. It gives us the information we need to give the content that you want. We hope you're keeping safe during these uncertain times. If you need any help or advice navigating this crisis, we're here. Give us a call. We'll do our best to help you. Once again, thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon for this first of our webinars. And we hope to see you again soon, hopefully in real life again. So back to you, Ben.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Stuart. So thanks everyone for attending. We hope to see you at the next one.